Good afternoon, everyone. This is David Weaver calling from Detroit, Michigan area, and it's about 3 o'clock in the morning here. I'm glad to be here with you. Appreciate the opportunity to share my thoughts with you. Today, I'll be talking about the issues as an angel investor that does early stage investing and as a business consultant that helps early stage companies prepare themselves for funding. So I'm with Cityside Ventures, and we're going to talk about the focus today is the future direction of biomedical industry and strategies. In the United States, we're seeing a big shift from more and more care moving away from a hospital into clinics and doctor offices. And the trend we think for the future is being pushed by the carriers or payers to doing more and more care for a patient in their residence, whether they're in a nursing home or whether they're living at home. The idea is to drive down the cost of care and make the products and services available to the patients in those settings. Like I said, like a nursing home or in their own private home residence. That's one thing that's changing for sure. Another thing we see is in the past, if you had some software in your product or your product was software, you had to make sure that the patient data collected was safe and not able to be seen. Also, you had to make sure that it didn't interfere with anything that happened that might cause a harm to the patient. That was always a concern. Now, I think another layers of interest for the trend is cybersecurity. Make sure your software and or devices are not hacked. So we need to put another layer of protection on the things you're developing now that didn't necessarily anticipate that cost or that need. That's definitely happening. So as I mentioned earlier, the first thing is change in the setting for care is moving away from the hospitals and clinics and doctors' offices into the actual patient residence where they're residing. So this is something that's changing. We see this as investors, and we like to know companies are attacking and addressing those issues as they change. Cityside Ventures is here in the Michigan area, and we look at companies and technologies outside of Michigan, the Midwest, and the United States. We are investing in foreign companies. Cityside Ventures manages 2 sources of income for companies, for startups raising capital. One is the Great Lakes Angels Fund. That's a $10 million early stage angel fund, and Birmingham Angels are individual angels that are grouped together that write checks with their own checkbook when they decide they like a company and how much they want to put into the company. It's all in their decision. In both cases, Great Lakes Angels Fund and Birmingham Angels, many times we're investing in companies that are pre-revenue or at the early stage of getting their first revenue. We like to know the revenue is not too far away if it's not in the company already. We like to look at companies that are raising $2 million US or less initially as a first round. We also like to know what future rounds are when they're presenting to us, because we're always concerned about how much dilution is going to happen to us. Because oftentimes we're first ones in, long time before there's venture capital investors. I put up this slide here because I think it's important for trends to make sure that if you have a product or service, there's a big difference between nice to have or need to have. I know when I was a salesman for surgical products division of Johnson & Johnson, oftentimes I could get some business because the product was convenient and was nice to have and easier to use, and made the nursing and physicians happier because it was easier and nice to have. Now that doesn't make it anymore. It really needs, if you want to have an adoption, have a difference to show that it is a need to have. It makes a big difference. They really need to have this. They need to build your product and service in mind, make it such that the decision maker on this figures that I really need to have this. And some of the major issues we call pain points are labor and shortages in skill sets, both in a hospital, clinic, or doctor's offices. We're seeing in the U.S. and in some of the other markets, there's a shortage of labor, or the skill sets are not available. They might have the staffing, but they don't have the training, they don't have the skills that are required. So things that address those are very, very important for you to have a successful product launch. Cost of providing care is always an issue. Every payer wants to find the most efficient and least costly way to provide care for the patient. So that's always something that's important. So as you have your strategy for your product or service in mind, make sure you identify that. And part of that cost of providing care is there reimbursement in place? Is your product or service similar to something else that's being reimbursed at a level that would be acceptable to you? Is going after a new code for billing the providers is not going to be so easy. It's going to be much better if you provide a product or service that has a reimbursement code that's already established, and you find a way that you can do that and make money at that level of that reimbursement code. Also, care areas are poorly being, what case areas are being poorly served, rather? Are there patient populations that are not being addressed well, and you have a solution for that patient population, and it's significant enough that you will have enough adoption in this to be attractive to angel investors. Remember, angel investors are always looking after an opportunity where the company's going to scale rapidly, and that you have sufficient capital to scale with, that you have a strong management team that will support the growth of that company early on. Oftentimes, the founders of early stage companies are technical people, which makes sense. You're the ones that are solving the problem, but there aren't enough business people in there to really drive the company to success. So when we make an investment, we're really looking at the management team. Make sure that you have a management team that understands the major issues that I'm just talking about and has a means to execute and bring their product to the market and help it scale, and will add staff as necessary. Like, companies are running lean and not spending cash too fast, that it's being spent in the right areas, and solving these problems with that in mind. So reimbursement is a big issue to make sure you have successful with whatever product or service that you have. And different markets are different reimbursement codes, and I'm sure you're all aware of the difference between Europe and Asia and the US for levels of reimbursement by country as well. One of the other things on the pain point is your product or service going to need a lot of education for the physician or the staff to adopt it. If it's very difficult for them to understand this, there's going to be a pushback for making them change their habits. So you want to find something that's easy to adopt and doesn't take a lot of training. You don't have to do missionary work to explain what your product or service is to people. That can be done, but it takes a long time to get sufficient adoption in the marketplace. I remember I launched a product where it was the first of its kind in the marketplace. A lot of people didn't understand what the application was, even though we had champions. The wide market did not understand. So it took a while to educate a lot of people before adoption really took hold. So make sure you're keeping that in mind. Some examples of companies addressing these pain points I put up here with a link to the website for them. First is use of robotics for delivering drugs and reducing staff needs. One of the trends we're seeing for the future is more and more robotic application in the marketplace, in the healthcare industry, and also a lot more digital health. You're probably seeing that there as well. Many of you are probably in the digital health already. I know one of the speakers is talking about digital health today. So this first company has come up with a robot that has already two hospitals, large hospitals here in Southeast Michigan, Henry Ford and William Beaumont hospitals adopting this and putting a robot in for delivering of drugs. Oftentimes, maybe a patient on a different floor needs some drugs delivered to them from the pharmacy. Rather than take a staff person and have them take a half hour to go fetch retrieve the drugs and bring them to the patient, they can use a robot to send down that has a lockable bin that records who took the drugs, what time it was, with a video even, and secures it inside the robot, and then the robot delivers it to the patient's room or the nursing station that needed the drugs. They can also deliver other things beyond drugs. They also can attach beds and pull beds for delivering them to, say they need to have some x-rays done or something like that, rather than have a nurse or another staff person take that and do that. Robotics can do that. This company is something you can take a look at. If you have some ideas in that place, marketplace, you can use this as an example, understand what's going on. Another company that I put here is Wide Awake VR. Is a company that's using virtual reality to help address patients that are oftentimes not able to take general anesthesia, but still need a procedure done, and or patient profiles that children that are anxious about going in having general anesthesia. This company has developed a way where topical anesthesia can be applied. Say you have a carpal tunnel done, or something else on your hand done, or another minor procedure, where the pain can be addressed at the local level, but by putting virtual reality goggles on the patient with some content on there, they're distracting the patient from what's going on and giving the patient something oftentimes educational about the procedure or other things for them to watch while the procedure takes place. So this moves it away from the hospital where you have to have general anesthesia to a physician's office or clinic's office where the patient can be cared for and just to have a topical, have the procedure done, and walk away happy that they didn't have to and recover much faster because there's no general anesthesia. And this reduces the cost and the labor of not having a lot of people in the hospital. You have to have anesthesiologists, you have to have other staff in the operating room, etc. Now you eliminate all that people, a lot of those people, and the cost goes down. The patients are much happier, providers are much happier as well. So it's a win-win for the patient, the provider, and the service provider that's providing the surgery as well. Another opportunity is addressing, as I mentioned, patients in this prior slide at the bottom here, where care areas are poorly serviced. This is working with patients that have multiple chronic conditions or illnesses, and they're addressing this with digital health and other services. As you can imagine, if a patient has, let's say, cancer in the colon, and they're being addressed with chemotherapy or radiotherapy, and also they have another condition, maybe they have a kidney condition or heart condition. So you have 3 or more different physicians providing drugs for them, or different types of diets or sleep or other things for them to care for their particular specialty application. But they're not always in concert with what's best for the patient in general. So this company here, Individualytics, has put together a team of people to follow the patients instead of the patient being followed every 90 or 100 days, 120 days by the doctor to find out how they're doing with the change they've implemented in the patient, whether it's with their diet or drugs. Individualytics has a team that follows the patient weekly, gets feedback from them on how they're doing on their health, their diet, their sleep, and so on, so they give feedback to the physicians right away that are dealing with the care of the patient and their drugs, stuff like that, to know if that's not working, they need to make a change again. But it's immediate feedback within the week of the care being provided. That's a big, big difference. And the cost of multiple chronic illnesses is a very significant dollar amount in the U.S. or anywhere around the world, because those people have a lot of care. Oftentimes have to go back into the hospital if things go wrong, and that's another big cost. So if you can do it with digital care and feedback by people calling and contacting the patient, or having them record their progress on a handheld smartphone or another device, and get feedback on a constant basis, there's a big savings for the providers that are paying for all this service, and the patients feel much better that they're getting personalized care, which is also a big trend. More and more personalized care is happening, and so they've implemented a lot of different devices in digital health area to get feedback constantly, daily, and hourly from the digital devices back to them for collecting it to share with the physicians. So that's another big area for care that we like to address. Something else to think about is, as investors, we like to know if a company is starting up, that you have a business plan and slide deck that shows the problem that you're solving, the size of the problem. So we want to know the magnitude of the problem you're solving, and your solution. We'd like to have a slide with a matrix showing competition and your product in the matrix, so we can see how the other people are doing. Just don't list the other competitions, like how they fit into a matrix for good and bad about everybody's services or products, and that it always helps your solution. Then we want to know what the management team is in your bio, your background on the management team, and make sure you round it out with advisors. If you're just starting out, it's important to have advisors to help you on the business side. And we like to see a revenue slide. We'd like to know what is being raised in the way of sales projected out 3 to 5 years, so we can see what you anticipate in the way of sales and profit and loss and how much is actual earnings at the end, your cash proceeds at the end of the sales after you take out all the other costs. So we don't want to know what your profit margins are and profits are. Ideally, we want to know if you have an exit strategy. When do you plan to have your company available for an exit? Investors are very interested in what the exit is. Is it 3, 5, 10 years out? We don't invest in companies that are out 10 years out, so we don't touch pharma companies. We look at companies that are probably in the device area or therapeutics that have a fuse of being so attractive with their adoption that within 3 to 5 years, they probably have people beating on their door asking about an acquisition. That's the kind of exit we like from angel side. We like to know how many rounds you're raising as well. The trend on that is to have smaller rounds and more reasonable valuations. We like to do rounds that are $2 million or less at the first round. We don't mind if you're raising more money behind that, but we like to have a reasonable valuation on a round. If you're raising like $2 million, we're not going to accept a $30 million valuation. It has to be something more reasonable, between 3 to 5 or 6, something like that, depending on how much success you've had with your adoption in the marketplace, or close to having adoption. That's very important for us to know what the exit strategy is. So it's a strong master team, ability to get the product to the marketplace, and that you've identified an exit. And hopefully you've addressed some of these things and understand that it's important that you're providing something that's need to have, and addresses some of these pain points, understand some of the trends that we're seeing in the U.S. marketplace here, as far as shifts in providers moving more and more to the patient residence at home, but still for a while will be provided clinics and hospitals, and helping them save money, provide services more efficiently. thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you all. I really appreciate it. And with that, I will close. And you have my bio. So you have questions about anything I've said or need help with anything where I can help you, feel free to reach out. Thank you again. Bye.